So for the past couple of years, I've been obsessed with trying to find the perfect travel camera. I want something that's really small, takes great photos and videos, and doesn't get in the way of capturing everyday moments when you're traveling. In the past, I've tried the Canon G7X, the RX100 Mark VII, the Fuji X100V, the Fuji X100VI, and I got really excited when I heard about this, the Fuji X-Half. On paper, this thing sounds like it could be the perfect travel camera. The first thing that really caught my attention with the Fuji X-Half is its size. You really can't appreciate how small this camera is until you get it into your hands. In photos and videos, it looks pretty small, but once you hold it, you truly realize how small this thing is. I really appreciate how little the lens actually sticks out from the camera. A lot of small cameras have a small body, but not a small lens, and with a small lens like this, you can actually put it into your pocket and forget that the camera is there. I'm gonna say this right away, if you plan on holding this thing a lot, you need to get a hand strap or a thumb grip, otherwise you're gonna drop this thing. For a camera this small, it feels kind of silly to throw a shoulder strap on this. I prefer to just throw it in my pocket or into my backpack. The back of this camera is pretty wild. It actually is the first camera I've seen with 2 touchscreens. The larger screen is to see what you're shooting and to look at all the menus and stuff, and the smaller vertical screen is pretty cool. This is where you can see your film simulations or interact with the menus more. The camera uses the same Fuji batteries that I've used in all of my Fuji cameras, and it charges via USB-C. It doesn't even come with a charger, which is kind of nice, keeps things really small and compact. Maybe I should have said this right from the beginning. This camera is the first camera, as far as I know, to have a vertical sensor. That means when I turn the camera this way and take a photo, the photo's vertical, and when I hold the camera vertically, it takes a horizontal photo. This was kind of tricky to wrap my head around for the first 2 or 3 days that I was shooting. Now it's kind of just second nature and it just seems normal. So just the fact that this camera has a vertical sensor makes it interesting enough, but there's a few other modes built into this camera that also make it more interesting or more confusing. This camera has all of the Fuji simulations that Fuji cameras are known for. Reala Ace, Classic Chrome, Nostalgic Negative. Now we're talking about film simulations, not film recipes. Film recipes like in the X100 series where you can dial in all of the minute settings to get a really customized look. These are just the film simulations, and the photos look great straight out of camera when you're applying these filters. The second interesting mode is a diptych mode. I can't remember what they're calling it in the X100, but you shoot these right in camera, and essentially it's 2 photos that are side by side that make one uniform image. And you do that just by initiating this lever on the back of the camera. The next standout feature is film camera mode. Once you turn this mode on, you can only see what you're shooting through the rear viewfinder. To advance to the next photo after you've taken one, you need to wind the lever on the back. You also can't preview any of the photos that you've taken or exit this mode until you finish the roll. Along with that, there's a few other interesting things to point out. There's like a filter situation, and you can add vignettes or retro, canvas, dynamic tone, like all of these not so interesting effects in my mind right into your photos. I don't think you're really gonna use these. They're not really worth talking about. Did I also mention that this camera is only JPEG? Not my favorite, but it's what I got. I've taken this camera on 2 or 3 trips now, and I've even carried it around town to use it as my daily driver. I gotta keep saying it, like a camera this small is just so easy to carry around. It's not like my Sony cameras where it's got a camera and a lens, and if I wanna bring a microphone and all of the accessories and battery, like this is just so small and it doesn't really take up any extra space. By having a camera this small, it's in my hand more often, and therefore I am taking more photos. Along with taking more photos, the photo taking experience is really simple on the X-Half. When you turn this camera on and look on the back screen, there's not a lot of information being presented to you. I mean, it is a small screen, you're not seeing much, but the settings don't get in the way. Even scrolling through the menus, there's not a lot of menus to scroll through. There's not a lot of options to pick between stuff, and just taking photos is front and center, not the nitpicky details in the settings. I also think it's pretty clever how Fuji uses the one screen to view the menus and the other screen to navigate through it. This actually kind of confused me the first few times I use it. Don't let this happen to you. Like I alluded, yeah, guys, this screen is very small. Like, check this out. Especially next to something like your iPhone, like this screen is really small. Along with that, the screen doesn't stop me from taking photos, but I feel like it kind of holds me back from taking like really good photos. When I'm framing something up and looking on the back of the screen, whatever I'm shooting doesn't look that great. It looks kind of pixelated, the dynamic range doesn't look amazing, and I just don't feel inspired. That's not the case when you see the finished photo, but it does lend to the photo taking experience. The photos do look pretty good. I think I mentioned that they're JPEG. I found that I'm not so great at exposing properly using this little screen and not even using a histogram, so I find that when I look at them later, I do need to adjust the brightness of them because I can't nail these in camera. But maybe making mistakes is the charm of having this camera. While we're talking about downsides, let's talk about this lever. The first time I switched the camera on, I thought it was pretty sick how it like popped out, but now after using it for about a month, I kind of wish it wasn't there. There's not a lot of tension to this lever, and when you're using it in the film camera mode, it feels like an extra step and kind of like a gimmick. But honestly, I can look beyond that. There's very few dials and buttons on the camera, which I actually like, which means you rely on the touchscreen. However, the touchscreen is a touch slow and a little bit glitchy, just not as reliable as I'd expect for the price I paid for this camera. Yeah, I paid for this camera with my own money. I really like that you can see what your finished image is going to look like on your back of your screen, but I do kind of wish that Fuji would describe how Astia looks or what Reala Ace does to your photos, especially if this is geared towards beginners. I feel like a beginner's going to want to know, does Eterna warm up your photos or make them cooler? Does classic chrome make your photos more contrasty or less? If it's going to make your photos look more vibrant. I've been using Fuji for like 3 years and I also forget what these mean. I think it's safe to say that if you're a Fuji X100 user, the XF is in a completely different league. The XF doesn't have a digital viewfinder, and I actually find the viewfinder on this kinda sucks. I'm actually pretty careful with my gear, and this camera has somehow got a tiny little scratch on the viewfinder, and I feel like it has totally messed up the viewfinder experience. Other than the viewfinder, the photo taking experience is completely different. When you're holding X100s in your hand, they feel solid, they've got actually some weight to them, and seeing the photos that you're taking on a large resolution screen on the back of your camera is kind of inspiring and empowering. Feels more like an experience than with the XF. The XF honestly really feels like a point and shoot camera. With the lack of a high resolution screen, the vertical photos, and the very simplified menus, this feels like it's built for a completely different consumer. I mean, like, just the fact that this camera has the lens cap on a string makes me feel like this is for a beginner. It's time to talk about this little switch back here. This camera quality is wild. Digicam lovers, you're gonna love this, especially with the crappy autofocus this thing is always hunting, and the lack of image stabilization. Shooting 4K video for pretty much my entire photo video career, this video is kind of a shock to my system, but there's a little part of me that still kind of loves it. So if you want to vlog on the Fuji XF, this is what it's gonna look like, and this is what it's gonna sound like. I've got no mics, this is just the built-in mics on the camera. Something we haven't touched on yet is the Fuji XF app. This might be the most reliable camera app that I've ever used. Connecting to the camera is really simple, literally just turning the camera on, opening the app and hitting connect, and the connection is pretty flawless. It's not the quickest to transfer photos over, but it works. I have some small gripes about the app itself, but just the reliability of itself is enough. Because this camera only shoots JPEGs, you really don't need a computer to do post-processing and can really just use your phone along with the camera, making the workflow for this camera really simple, fun, and low lift. After owning this camera for about a month now, I have a hard time deciding whether I'm gonna keep this camera in my kit and who it's for. Initially, I wanna say this camera is for beginners because of the simplified menus, how easy it is to just pick up and shoot, and just the small portable nature of a camera like this. But the price of this camera is kinda hard to justify for the features you get or the features that you actually don't get in this camera. Right now, my favorite feature in this camera is the film camera mode. I've just started shooting film and it is really expensive, and I don't know if I can justify spending that kind of money anytime I want to take photos. I have so many other cameras, but I really enjoy the experience of slowing down and shooting just a single photo, and I like that the film camera mode on this camera does that for me. Quality-wise, I don't think that those photos are the best. However, I'm encouraged to slow down and be intentional about the photos that I take when this is in film camera mode. Now, is this camera worth keeping just for that? I don't know yet. I gotta keep playing with it. I mean, in general, I don't know if I'm the consumer for this camera, and I still am having a hard time figuring out who is. Right now, like I'm glad that this camera exists. It is so interesting to me, but I don't know who it's for. If you've got this camera and you've got a really neat use case for this thing and you can help me justify keeping this camera, let me know in the comments, because I think this thing is pretty cool despite all of its downfalls. My name's Davey, thanks for letting me spill the gravy, and we'll see you in the next video.